Alrighty. So, welcome to a very special episode of My Real Sharks. I am joined by writer, director, editor, Rob Ciano. Say hey, everybody, to the audience, Rob.
Hey, everybody to the audience, Rob.
Thank you, sorry.
How's it going?
Well, it's an early day for me, so it's going good. It's going good. It's a beautiful day out here in AZ. Is it out? Are you out in New Jersey?
I'm out in New Jersey, currently in Atlantic City, where the weather is a nice 55 degrees and a little cloudy, but it's okay.
Nice, very nice. Yeah. Well, again, thank you for joining us. So go ahead and tell my audience a little bit about yourself, Rob.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, my name is Rob Ciano. I'm a writer-director based in New Jersey. I've been acting and making movies for most of my life, and I was finally able to create a feature film called Shimmer. That's the literally my dream come true to make a feature film, and I'm glad to be able to make a really cool one, such as this is. Shimmer itself is it's a mystery thriller. Our tagline is, "Are you afraid of the light?" There is an entity that lives in the light, and you really kind of can't see it during the day. Our main character is a forensic scientist investigating a series of strange deaths, and as she continues to investigate, she realizes this doesn't really seem like a human killer, and then she realizes, oh my gosh, this thing is after me and has to stop it. I realize I kind of turned that into being about the movie, but there we are.
No, that's great. We're gonna go ahead and get into Shimmer. I just had a few questions though before we had to move on to your feature. So, Rob, what inspires you to do films? Like, what's your MO behind the whole thing?
Well, I grew up acting on stage. I started acting on stage when I was about 8 years old. Myself and my sister, and then eventually my brother. I'm the oldest of three, and we did a lot of community theater musicals growing up. Everything we did, shows like The King and I, The Music Man, Connecticut Yankee, King Arthur's Court, all these like big, Rodgers and Hammersteins, Oklahoma. And I really, from a very young age, was involved in the process of creating entertainment in that fashion. Community theater is by definition not professional, so it was a lot of just fun and people getting together to create something really cool, and then the community enjoys it. And that sort of started to morph into an interest in film, because also when I was pretty young, a friend of mine got a video camera for Christmas, and we started making movies. And I, as I said, having been involved in not just, acting, but sort of in the process of creating something, this was another way for me to start making something that other people could enjoy. And I really dove into the medium of film, and, I made video projects for every project that I could throughout middle school and high school. I was known as like the video guy or the acting guy. And, when it came time to choose what I wanted to do for a career, I just kind of figured, well, there's a lot more that I can do with being a filmmaker. Not to knock actors at all, but I just had more. I didn't want to just perform. I also wanted to tell stories, make stories. Use the camera. So that to me told me, okay, well then I have to go and become a full-fledged filmmaker. And it took a while. Took a long time. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But
makes it all worth it, though.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%.
So, do you feel like it's more about telling the story, or do you think it's more about conveying a underlying message with your audience?
Well, so it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, because to me, story is king. I don't care what kind of camera that you have. I don't care who you're acting in the, who's acting in the movie. It doesn't matter if you don't have a good story. You're not going to have a good movie. Meanwhile, if you have, a smartphone, if you shoot something on an iPhone, but it has a really good story and it's compelling, you're going to have something entertaining to watch. So, for me, story is king. Now, that story is created by exploring different themes. So as I said, a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, because theme definitely has a lot of power over how the story is told. For me, there were one or two elements in this script that came about just because of the theme. And I said, oh, this makes logical sense because of this metaphor that I'm working with and the way that these characters are interacting. And so they really work hand in hand. But as I said, I wouldn't say one necessarily outweighs the other because they feed into one another for me when I work.
Okay. So speaking of stories, let's get a little bit with the present here. So we got Hocus Pocus 2. We got Matrix
Mhm.
4 coming out. We got the remake of West Side Story. Let me ask you, Rob, is originality dead? Or is Hollywood not coming out with any good ideas? Or do you think it's just the phase we're going through with these times right now of remakes?
Well, I wouldn't say originality is dead. I think that it's just a little more challenging for something very original to be seen. And as far as what people are going to invest in, investors, traditionally want something that's going to be a sure thing. They want to make their money back. They want to make a little bit of profit. So, you have something like the Matrix 4. Well, the first three Matrix movies, including the second and third ones, which didn't do quite as well critically, they made a ton of money. So somebody says,
Right.
hey, I want to make Matrix 4. You think that's a pretty good investment because you have this existing track record. That's where I think that some young, some newer filmmakers may have a little bit of a hurdle if they come at something with a very original story. It may be a little more difficult for somebody to say, well, A, what is this and how am I supposed to know that it's going to make me my money back? And B, who are you and why should I listen to you? You know, but as far as originality goes, I think there is plenty of original content out there. It's just whether that content is presented in such a way, kind of
To
going back to what
sell.
I was saying. Yeah, exactly. It's got to be presented in such a way that somebody's going to want to watch it. You know,
Right, because
you
people think the Matrix is a safe bet compared to this original story that someone, it's just out of nowhere came up with. They're gonna say,
absolutely,
hey, that's not gonna put, butts in the seats. This is gonna put butts in the seats.
exactly. So then you have to make a really cool trailer, and you make a 5 second version of the trailer at the top of the trailer, and then the rest of the trailer is leading up to that same 5 seconds that you watched already to sell it. And it's like, okay, well, why not just give somebody else a shot? You know.
I agree. So let me ask you this though. So what would be your biggest compliment of the film industry right now? That's the first question. The second part of the question is, next part is, right now, what would be your biggest criticism of it?
My biggest compliment to the film industry right now is I think that it is actually starting to recognize some potential elsewhere because it has to. It's sort of being forced to recognize this talent elsewhere. Stuff, Hollywood is turning to YouTube and TikTok for stars, but I think that in at the same time as they're looking for these kind of stars with a big presence, they're also noticing like why they have a big presence. You know, so I think that I would give Hollywood a little bit of credit, even if they are sort of their hand is sort of being forced to pay attention to these new stories, these new kind of ways that people want to tell stories. Um, Even if they're sort of being forced to deal with that, they are somewhat dealing with it. You can kind of see that in stuff like Netflix shows where it's not necessarily the traditional 22-minute or 42
Yeah.
minute thing. You'll see an episode that's 10 minutes versus an episode that's 20 versus. So that to me is indicative of little bits of change. My criticism would be that change is so far overdue that it's almost throwing them a bone by giving them credit for it,
Right. No, I
because
completely agree.
that would be my criticism, is that these talented people have always been there. It's just that you've always been shutting the door in their face. So good on you for actually noticing that there's stuff going on outside of the Hollywood model. But it's been going on outside the Hollywood model
Right.
this whole time. Why are you only just noticing now? You know?
It was like that for a long time for international films. International films had a hard time breaking through on Netflix and American audiences, but now, if you haven't noticed, Netflix is starting to really pander a lot more to international audiences with a lot of their shows. A lot of it's subtitled, and they're great stories. Some of them are better than some of the American productions, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, completely agree.
So, what was your favorite movie that's come out so far? Either this year or last year. Which one would you say really like inspired you? Was like, yeah, that's a great movie. I enjoyed that film.
hmm I haven't had the opportunity to see too many films the past year and a half. Um, I, you know what? That's almost a difficult question to answer. I'm trying to remember because the movies that I've been watching are the movies that have been on my watch list.
Mm,
So, something like one thing that I watched recently that I know is a recent film is the film Luca, the Disney Pixar film Luca, about
yeah,
the young Lion Boy, Sea Monster,
Mermaid's
which
version,
was,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
that
like
was
their
very
version of Little
cute.
Mermaid. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cute. I enjoyed watching it. I mean, it's a Disney film, so you kind of know what you're going into to expect it. Um, but I'm of Italian American heritage, so it was nice to kind of watch that representation of the country of my ancestors. And it is cool to see a little bit of representation. As little as it was in the film, but it's interesting. It's interesting, and I'm glad that film is out there, and I'm glad there are more films that are being released that show some representation and alternate storylines and different
No, I
ways that
completely agree. It's definitely a breath of fresh air from Disney's old tropes like Pocahontas and stuff, where it was just everything that was in Native American lore. We're just going to throw that in that film, and hopefully you won't notice. Okay, so
yeah.
let's go ahead and talk about Shimmer. So you explained to my audience a little bit about Shimmer and the overall premise of it. How long did it take to shoot Shimmer?
We shot Shimmer over the course of about a month, maybe a month and change. I think our total shoot days, I think we had maybe 19 actual shoot days over the course of that month. So we actually had it was a pretty condensed schedule. But a lot of the locations were repeating, so that was helpful. We were able to move into one space for a few days, get everything we needed there, move into the next space, and work in that capacity.
Any production trouble, even among COVID?
Well, we actually shot prior to COVID. We shot this back
Okay.
in November and December of 2019. Actually,
Okay.
October and November of 2019. So yeah, COVID didn't impact our production schedule at all. And fortunately for our production, uh, I mean, COVID did slow things down for us in the post-production phase, but we were in the post-production phase at that point. So the work that we needed to do was digital, and we were able to, I wasn't able to physically be there with my editor or my visual effects person, but we were able to communicate. So it was slower, but we got those things done.
I thought the idea was really great. Creature feature films, especially detective, putting that detective horror kind of aspect is really hard genre to push. So, did that challenge for you at all?
I'm sorry, the Skype just kind of jumped on me.
Okay, I'm sorry. Um, I said, the detective. Well, let me back up a little. But first
Sure.
of all, I love the premise of the movie. I thought it was great. I think the detective aspect in horror is always a hard genre to push. So I thought it was done well. What I really wanted to give you a compliment on was the cinematography. The visual effects were very, very good. They were fantastic. I mean, the camera work I thought was very,
Thank you.
very, 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 very well done. But with that genre of the whole, was that hard to kind of portray the horror detective aspect?
I think it was. I'm not somebody. I've seen a few classic horror films. The Shining. Different films. Nosferatu. Like I've seen like
Hmm.
the very bunch of very classic horror films. I haven't seen too many modern horror films. That's not really the genre that I gravitate to. So for me, in writing it, that was a little bit challenging because I had to keep thinking of ways to and I think that's kind of why it ended up being more, this story about somebody figuring things out and
Hmm.
being this detective character. Because I think that my approach to horror is like, okay, well, here's a thing that's scary, but why is it scary?
I like that
You know,
approach.
and that's one thing that I really wanted to bring into the film. You'll notice there's very few jump scares. What
Hmm.
I wanted to do in the film was I wanted to establish why this creature was a threat, so that way you don't have to have it jump out at you when you see it. You understand why you should be threatened right now, why you should fear for the
You want the
characters.
horror to drive the story, not just
Right.
be there for no reason. That's why I can't stand with certain horror gore. Like when you see something really gory, everyone's like, "Oh God, so gross!" But I'm like, why? I didn't
Yeah.
need to see this guy's jaw fall off. That wasn't why. That didn't have anything to do with the story whatsoever. So I do
Yeah.
like when horror drives the story.
Yeah, I mean, blood itself is not scary. Gore itself is not scary. What's scary is why
Why?
someone is doing that thing to that person. That's the thing that's scary. you don't necessarily need to show someone's limbs flying all over the place to have an impact on the audience. And that's something that I really wanted to do with this film was, have it be, I wanted there to be tension. I wanted there to be fear for the characters, but I didn't want to have that fear come from jumping out and loud music hits and here's an arm flying at your face.
Right.
That has its place, certainly, but there's other ways to generate tension and emotion from your audience, and I was more interested in that.
So you had Nicole Galisa as the main star, correct? And then you also had Kazy. Kazy has actually been on this show. Great guy.
Yeah.
What was it like working with Kazy?
Kazy's great. Kazy, I like working with Kazy because he's very collaborative. He thinks a lot about his character. He thinks a lot about the scenes, and he actually brought up a couple of suggestions for different scenes in the film and said, hey, this idea, doesn't really, I think that we could do this thing a little differently. He really brought a lot to not only the character of Kurt, but also to the film, because he was there as a supportive person. He was there on set, being on the team. That's really what it is like he was an excellent person to have on the team. We had a really good team putting this film together. And when I say that he brought, things to the film and contributions, I don't mean that he's coming in there like a diva and saying like, oh, I want my character to say this instead. He's saying, hey, here's the story that we're trying to tell. I see what you're trying to do with this scene. I think it makes more sense if my character says this line because of this reason, without stepping on toes. He was very collaborative like that. And I enjoyed working with him for that reason. And also just his professionalism, the way that he turns on his character, the way that he goes into the scene. And it, definitely, I was very fortunate to work with Kazy, very fortunate to work with Nicole. Everybody who was involved in the film, had a ton of talent.
One of the things I did like that you wrote in the film, which I thought was very interesting, and I don't know if too many people are going to catch it, but I absolutely loved it, and let me tell you why. I liked the role reversal in your character with the husband and wife, how the husband was cheating with another guy.
Mm.
I love that because when that whole scene happened, I sat there and I went, "Oh my god, yeah, thank God!" I was like, because it's a breath of fresh air. Because always, it's constant. Oh, the wife's cheating. The wife is up to something. But I was just like, oh, that was it's those little nuances that make a movie really good to me. It's those little things like that, like because I haven't seen that done. I haven't seen that too much. So I was really like, oh, thank God this guy's at least, being like, no, I'm not gonna write. I'm gonna write it like this because that's different. Let's change it up a little bit. So was there a reason for that, or was it just kind of like that was planned all along?
Well, it was planned all along. It actually came out very naturally in the writing. Going back to our discussion about theme and story, that actually was one of the overall themes of the film that came out in the character, because one of the things that we talked about, with the actors, and one of the discussions that was really going on at the time that I was working on the script and writing it was this idea of toxic masculinity and how that affects people and what that does. And so, there is this kind of theme of toxic masculinity running through the film. And so the character of Adam, first of all, representing the everyman, his name is Adam. It made sense to me that he would be a character who could be influenced both by the female, the female strength and the male strength. And so that kind of really came about. And later on, when you realize what actually happened in that scenario, and then it goes further into that same metaphor. So that element, and I don't want to like spill the beans exactly on what's going on there, but that element came out naturally because in the story, because of the theme that we were working with, him cheating on his wife with a man. You don't see that.
No.
And so there definitely was an element of subversion of expectations, but it also played directly into the overall story.
Well, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I was very, very like, God, I was like, thank you for that. I was like, thank God someone has some, like, someone's not just writing tropes here on this script. You know what I mean? Because it's sometimes people and directors, really, Scott, they get into too many formulaic script writing, I think, and it's just almost robotic at that point. And it just kind of, to me, it just takes away from the whole film. So What's next for you? What's the future looking like for you, Rob? Is it going to be more horror? Is it going to be? I know you're currently working on another project.
Currently working on another
We'll
project. The
call it
next project,
29.
yes, vastly different film than Shimmer is.
Mm-hmm.
29 is a rom-com. It is about two naive 20-somethings who have sort of been skating their way through life, never had to make many major decisions, and they meet and start to fall in love just in time for life to threaten to take them in separate directions. So they have to take the reins of their lives for the first time and really understand what that means. That's a very kind of simple film. That one I did write during COVID. We shot that during COVID, very carefully. We were shooting that at a time when you could only have a maximum of 10 people in one space. And so we did a lot of really interesting camera work so we could maintain a 6-foot distance between our actors, as well as fake different scenarios. For example, there's a scene where our characters go and see a band playing at a bar, and the script called for people to dance. We pulled that scene off and made it look like a pretty packed bar with a grand total of 7 people on camera and 3 people behind the camera because we could only have 10 people in the space.
Movie magic.
So, movie magic, exactly. So yeah, 29 is coming up. Beyond that, I really want to just make, my goal for myself and my company is to make one film a year moving forward. So beyond this 29, which I'm nearly done. I'm just finishing up post-production on 29 now. I've got a few other outlines for some stories. I have an action comedy. I have a drama. I have just kind of like a straight comedy. I have another sci-fi horror film. So I'm not necessarily sticking to one genre. I am excited to stretch my creative wings, and I really have many types of stories that I would like to tell. So I'm just very grateful to have the opportunity to move forward and continue doing that.
Very nice. Is there anybody right now during this interview you'd like to throw a shout out to, like you'd like to work with?
Anybody I'd like to throw a shout out to that I'd like to work with? Well, I will say that I have multiple Doctor Who storylines in my brain. So if anybody's interested in some good Doctor Who storylines, I've got some fingers that are ready for some typing. You know, I think it'd be great to sit down with someone like Jon Favreau and just talk about how one does what he's done with his career, or somebody comparable as well. He seems like a very approachable person, and yet he's got a portfolio that shows a mastery of his craft. So I'm somebody like that, or who knows, anybody.
So was it difficult working with visual effects for Shimmer?
It wasn't overly difficult because I have done a lot of visual effects myself growing up. I was really inspired growing up by Star Wars, so some of my first
Always.
short films, yeah, exactly. Most of my short films growing up had something to do with Star Wars, and that led to me, in middle school and high school, experimenting with doing visual effects myself. I got visual effects programs, and my friends and I would make lightsaber videos in the backyard, and then I would put special effects into it. So, where it became tricky was, since the film is so much about light and we have a creature and it's a creature film, I really wanted I wanted it to feel natural in the scene. We got to do a lot of playing around with practical lighting effects. We were splashing water in a pan and then reflecting light out of it so it would bounce on the wall, and we can match that with the effects later on. So for me, I didn't find it challenging necessarily as much as I just found it fun to figure out that next step, because kind of a lot of people, I feel that someone like George Lucas makes movies because he wants to push technological boundaries and he wants to tell stories using really cool elements and effects and stuff like that. And that definitely idea rubbed off on me.
So
and
with
I
that being
liked the
said,
idea. Yes.
with that being said, would you ever, and with the future, would you ever consider doing a like a Pixar style movie? Like if you were given the project to direct a Pixar style film like Luca, would that be something that you'd be interested in doing?
I would definitely be interested in trying something like that. I think it's probably a very different approach. but I would absolutely be up for that challenge. I used to do, when I was especially in middle school, a lot of stop action animation using Legos or clay and stuff like that. So I would really, I think I would have fun revisiting an animation world. Yeah.
Nice,
Yeah.
very nice. That's great. So, let's go ahead and finish up. Why don't you go ahead and tell my audience a little bit about your company, where we can find more of your work, Rob?
Absolutely. Well, my company is called Venture Cinema, as if you're going off on an adventure, and that's venture-cinema.com. There'll be news and updates on that site, as far as Shimmer, where you can find it, as well as 29 and other future projects of mine. You can also go to my website, which is robciano.com. I'm available on social media, Rob Ciano Film on Instagram, Rob Ciano on Twitter, and Rob Ciano on Facebook. And then, of course, the Shimmer pages, shimmerthemovie.com. You can watch the film you can watch the film on Amazon, you can watch the film on Vudu, Dish, In Demand, and you can also, in the United States, pick up the film on Blu-ray and DVD at Walmart. And of course, we have the Shimmer profile pages as well on Instagram, Shimmer the Movie, Facebook, The Shimmer Movie, and Twitter, Shimmer the Movie.
And of course, we're going to give our audience we're going to give them the trailer before we kick on this interview with you, so they'll know what the film's about. But that's Rob Ciano, everybody. Thank you for joining us, Rob. We appreciate it so much. I appreciate your
Absolutely.
time. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for being on a Real Shark with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I'll see you next time.
Yep. Have a good day, Rob.
You too.
Hello?
Seneca PD, Dr. Kate?
Speaking.
I'm patching you through to Detective Bloss.
Thea.
Hey, Kurt, what you got?
Dead guy. Sort of. It's weird. Just get down here.
Be there soon.
Mrs. Hardaway, this is Dr. Thea Kate. She's our head of forensics. She's gonna help us figure out this thing. This is Margaret Hardaway. She lost her husband today.
Well, we're definitely looking at human tissue here, but it's weird.
Like all the moisture was removed.
5 total now, but somehow someone keeps turning the victims' bodies into that.
Wait, are you sure this is safe for Trevor Miles?
It's like an animal.
An animal made of light. How does that make sense?
At one point in time, this was Terrence Hardaway.
So this thing's a hunter. Does that mean you're its prey?
The last 6 months, you've just not been the same.
This light or something is killing people. I think it's coming after me.
Captain Rose, are you interrogating me?
Hey, this is not a game. What is your problem?
What is your problem?
There's no way that can go through glass, right?
I need some help in here.
She said it was in the light.